Today, I'm so excited to welcome Kate Kripke to What the Gut. Kate is a maternal mental health expert, licensed clinical social worker, and the founder of the Calm Connection System, a neuroscience backed program that helps high achieving mothers break free from anxiety, guilt, and burnout so that they can finally feel calm, confident, and connected to themselves and their families. Sign me up.
Ah, sign me up too, Allison.
Yes. Now, with over 2 decades of experience, Kate offers more than just surface level advice. She guides mothers in addressing the true root causes of their stress by working with the nervous system, healing deeply ingrained belief systems, and honoring the mind body connection that so many of us overlook in motherhood. If you've ever wondered why burnout still lingers, even whenever you're doing all the right things, or if you're curious about the link between gut health, anxiety, and emotional regulation, then this episode is for you. Kate's insights are both science based and deeply compassionate, and I cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. You're listening to What the Gut, a functional medicine and holistic health podcast for busy women who are ready to take charge of their health without the overwhelm. I'm Allison, your host, a double board certified family nurse practitioner specializing in functional medicine, here to help you decode the gut hormone connection and finally get the answers that you've been searching for. In this space, we're cutting through the confusion and diving deep into holistic wellness, because feeling your best is not just about another diet or quick fix. It's about understanding your body, healing from the inside out, and making sustainable changes that fit into your real busy life. From gut health to energy struggles, hormonal imbalances to sustainable weight loss, I'm bringing you practical strategies, expert insight, and real talk that will help you thrive, not just survive. So if you're ready to finally feel good in your body again, hit that subscribe button and let's do this together. Quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and empowering purposes only, and it is not intended as medical advice. Be sure to consult with your personal healthcare provider for personal recommendations. Welcome to What the Gut, where we take control of our health one episode at a time. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Allison. I am so glad to be here. And actually, I love that you fumbled in the very beginning because maternal mental health, like being an advocate in maternal mental health, is a little different than mental health without the maternal first, because we are like looking for ways to be mentally, emotionally healthy in relationship with our kids, because
Yes.
maternal and child mental health are so deeply interconnected. So it is slightly
Yeah.
different than your general mental health work.
It is. And I'm very interested because I'm like, this sounds great. Now, you have this Calm Connection system that you've created, and you have helped over 6,000 moms. I'm curious what led to the creating of this, and also what makes this approach so different than just traditional parenting advice.
Yeah, thanks for asking what led to it. The shortened version of a 52-year-long story is that I was raised by two very loving parents, but who both struggled with a lot of anxiety, perfectionism. They were high performers, high achievers. And again, if being raised in an environment with two parents who were trying to quote unquote get it right all the time, who were trying to perform. Actually, side note, my mom died 8 years ago at age 71, by the way, of a stress related illness. She said to me the last time I saw her, I was driving her to the airport, and she said to me, Kate, I have been running for class president every day of my life.
Oh, wow.
And that is just, I just want to paint that picture of the environment that I was raised in, because I think probably a lot of your listeners can relate on some way or another. There's always a spectrum, but I grew up with lots of privilege. I had a quote unquote great childhood, and the energy in the home was really stressful and tense. And I
Yeah.
was the recipient of that. So I grew up needing to be perfect, or believing I needed to be perfect a lot of the time, and trying to do the quote unquote right thing, being the good girl. I suffered from a lot of anxiety myself, panic attacks. I think on paper, my life looked great, and people probably would have looked at me and said, what does she have to stress about? But
Yeah.
inside, I was falling apart.
Yeah.
And my first daughter, who's now 18. She just graduated from high school this weekend, which is
Oh, wow.
so crazy. But when I had her, I had very severe postpartum anxiety. I'm trained, I should say I'm trained as a psychotherapist. So I did clinical based maternal and child mental health work for over 20 years. I started a clinic here in Boulder. So when I had my daughter, I was doing that work and I was really following more traditional methods of support and treatment for depression and anxiety. And it was not shifting for me. I kept recycling and all the old stuff over and over again. And I finally decided that what we tend to lean towards when women, people in general, but when we as moms are struggling with depression or anxiety, and for me, it was more anxiety than depression, is an OB will say, here's a prescription and will be, which by the way, sends the message that there's a pathology here,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about. I do not believe this is pathology. I don't think we're broken. I actually don't believe there's anything wrong. So we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Or we get a referral for a therapist. And I've been on both sides. I've been a client and a clinician. And in therapy, it really is pretty common that we just keep recycling in the old stuff over and over again. So
Yeah.
I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. So I dug deep. I read a ton. You take this perfect, our brains, those of us who are high achievers, it's really helpful when we're trying to reach external goals. Not so
Yes.
helpful in motherhood.
Yeah.
But I used that brain and I basically took myself through a system, which I now take my clients through. So that's how I got here. What makes the Calm Connection system different is that we're really looking at the root cause of chronic stress and anxiety for women that often kind of it's almost like that on steroids when we become mothers. And so we have to dig underneath and see what that kind of root cause is and treat the problem there.
Yeah.
Because what we know, Allison, for you and me and your children and my children and everyone we know is that our deepest beliefs that we have about ourselves, which for many of us who are high achievers, high performers, are actually quite fear-based. What if I'm not enough? And then we spend our
Right.
lives trying to prove that we are, right?
Yeah.
But those deep fear-based beliefs lead to the kind of thoughts we have on a daily basis. Those thoughts lead to how we feel emotionally. Those emotions lead to certain behaviors that become habits, and those habits lead to the results of what our life looks and feels like. And so we can't just change the habits, and we can't just learn how to tend to our nervous system, and we can't just take better care of ourselves. Although all of those things are really important, we
Mhm.
actually have to dig under and see what is that fear-based belief that's leading to the chronic stress in our bodies, which of course leads to gut challenges and all kinds of physical challenges if we're walking around with that much fear and tension in our body. So that was a lot of talking, Allison, but does that make sense?
Yes, it's all very interesting. And I'm curious. So, for somebody listening, if they are experiencing all this and they are on a medication
Yep.
and they want to figure out the root cause. I know you said nervous system regulation, that's just one piece of it. So, can somebody come to you and be doing all of these things and still be able to find the root cause, or are medications masking a lot of that?
They 100% can find the root cause. I'm not opposed to medication. So I want to be really clear about this. I am trained in a Western medical model.
Yeah.
I find in my own life, raising two daughters, I find huge value in medicine when appropriate. I've taken medicine. So I by no means do I want anyone listening who has gone the medication route to think they're doing something wrong. They're not. However, to your point, I don't know that it masks the root problem, but it does not get to the root problem. What
Yeah.
I find for many people is that they will take the medicine, they will go to the therapist, but they still don't feel the way they want to feel in their lives.
Yeah.
So it's not, again, I think it's entirely appropriate to do this work while also doing those things. Because what I have people say to me is, man, I have been in therapy for a decade. and never moved this quickly. Or I've been taking medicine for so long and never gotten to a place where I can feel this kind of joy. It's just that it doesn't get to the root cause, but it's not counterindicated. Does that make
Right. Yes. And that's where my thought was too. My assumption, what I say to my patients too, is this is a tool. This is just one
Yes.
tool.
Yes.
But to get to the root, you can use all these tools, but are you using them appropriately? Are you going the right way with it?
And I think what kind of breaks my heart the most is the women who go those routes. They take the medicine, they do the therapy, they're still struggling. And that's even more evidence to back up that fear-based limiting belief. See, there must really be something wrong with me because
Yeah.
even these things aren't working. Or
Yeah.
they might say, I guess this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that is hurts my heart when both of those things come out
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah. Now, I have a question. So, I know you've said before, like just self-care as a mom is just that alone is not enough.
Uh,
So, why do these traditional strategies often fall short for
yep,
moms?
great question. So, I like in my mind, I'm such a visual learner. So, I'm going to talk about this in a visual way. I like to think of this as like a hose, right? We want the water to flow through the hose. And if I am doing all the things that I know I'm supposed to do to take care of myself, right? I am getting to bed at a decent hour. I'm trying to eat more healthy. I'm trying to take a deep breath, have a mindfulness practice. I'm trying to move my body and get exercise. Like all those things that we actually do know are really important for resiliency to stress, to feed our brain, to build resiliency. If I'm going about those things, but somewhere deep inside my psyche, I believe I'm not worthy or I believe I'm not enough, that's like a kink in the hose. So those things are only going to work for so long because we're trying to implement those things from a baseline belief that's incongruent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And here's the thing I hear all the time is someone will say, I'm working so hard to do those things. And by the way, because I work with moms and because most of my moms have young kids, there tends to be so much guilt, right? I'm taking all this time away from my child to do these things to take care of myself, and it's not even working. I hear
Yeah.
this so much. It's so hard to get the effort to do these things. What we find in the calm connection system is that when we actually treat the root cause, and we unearth that limiting fear-based belief and poke holes in it, we really dismantle that hardwiring. And we can talk about where these beliefs come from in a moment if you want to. But when we change that, the self-care comes easily. It's effortless. It's just what we do when we love ourselves. It's just what we do when we believe we're worthy. It's just what we do when we ultimately trust that we are enough. So the effort to quote unquote take care of ourselves or do that self care is lessened so much because we're making it easy to access.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now, like a lot of moms experience burnout. I'm curious though, what do you think are some of the biggest reasons why, or some of the biggest signs, I guess, if somebody doesn't realize they're in burnout, but you
Yep.
see this from outside perspective, why do you think that's so common? Why do we experience things like this?
Yeah, maybe we could just define burnout first because
Yeah.
burnout is really significant. So we have like exhaustion and overwhelm, and then we have burnout. And by the time we get to burnout, we often need a lot more reparative support, right? Because our body is really shut down mentally, psychologically, emotionally, and physically by the time we hit burnout. Signs of burnout are things like deep fatigue, even when we're doing those things to take care of ourselves. So the fatigue is like this underlying symptom so that you can go take a break, but you come back and you're just still really tired. You're not getting that resurgence of energy we would really, quote unquote, expect in a healthy human that when she goes to bed early or eats healthy or drinks enough water or moves her body, she's going to come back with more energy. When someone's already in burnout, that does not happen. The other thing we see is a lot of cynicism. It's a very interesting symptom of burnout. It's like that feeling of doesn't even matter anyway. that I'm just gonna whatever anyway. I'm just gonna be tired anyway. I'm just gonna have to do it all myself anyway. So it's that lack of inspiration and motivation and hope that, again, we want to be instilling that. If we don't have that, it's just like feeling like I'm just like a lump on the floor and it's not even worth putting in the effort. That is
Yeah.
a major telltale sign that someone's in burnout. I think
Yeah.
those are probably two of them, without going down the rabbit hole of burnout, that many of your listeners could probably relate to.
Just some of those more common ones. So
Yeah.
now you mentioned earlier some of the reasons of why, like where things come from with us having this mentality of, oh, I'm not good enough, things like that. I forget how you worded it, but I'd love to dive down that for a second because I do think, like you said, it's like we're perfectionists, a lot of us. And then whenever we do become moms, it's like it all gets exacerbated. And the anxiety, the postpartum anxiety, I had that as well after my first child, very bad. And like, where does that come from?
Yeah, great. I'm going to take us a roundabout way to answer that question. Okay.
Okay.
Because just to go back to the burnout thing for a moment, I think, what if we can break it down layer by layer, what quote unquote causes burnout is depletion. If I am depleted, if I am not bringing into my body what my body needs to be resilient to stress, and I am living a stress filled life, which, by the way, you could do nothing else outside of motherhood and have a child and you've entered a stress filled life, right? By definition, having a
Yeah.
child is full of stress. That's
Yeah.
not because we're doing anything wrong. That's just there's so much uncertainty and unpredictability and chaos, of course, right?
Yeah.
And there's neuroscience behind that. We're wired, our brains are wired to see uncertainty and unpredictability as a threat. Because when we humans first walked the planet, life was real simple. It was either live or die. It was either quiet, silence, or and safe, or rustling in the bushes and you're going to be eaten, right? It was so simple. Life is so much more nuanced now, but our brain is still wired that anytime we are having an experience of uncertainty and unpredictability, our body goes into fight, flight, or freeze as a survival technique. And again, there is no motherhood without uncertainty and unpredictability. So we're
Right.
wired to feel that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if I enter motherhood and I have all kinds of limiting fear-based beliefs around what it means to be a mom, and moms are selfless and they sacrifice, and my job is to take care of my child first. And at this stage of my life, I don't really matter anymore. And all these things that may come from culture or society or stereotypes, or maybe the way we were parented by our own mothers, right?
Yeah.
Then we're going to suddenly taking care of ourselves, our brains and bodies will begin to feel selfish. Now, if I am being a mother, if I am doing my mothering from a place of depletion, over time, that will turn into burnout because it's
Mhm.
just not sustainable. So
Yeah.
that's the more tangible answer to your question. The more kind of deeper answer to your question is, again, if I am, like, we'll take myself, if I am Kate Kripke, and I come into adulthood with this little teeny tiny tickle of a belief about myself that I'm not enough, that that belief has motivated me to prove to the world that I am. I've gotten good grades and I have great friends and I've excelled in things that I've set my mind to. And I'm like a go-getter and I'm never satisfied. I'm always trying to do more. I have had good jobs. I've had accolades. I've gotten attention. People think that I'm amazing at these quote unquote things I've achieved. And that makes me feel good about myself, right? My whole life is spent on that energy tangent. And of course, you may be able to relate to this. I'm sure some of your listeners too. I can reach those goals, but now I'm not enough anymore. Now I need to do the next one. So it's like constant. And I enter motherhood and I use that same template, that same strategy for success to be a quote unquote good mom. Now I'm doing and doing. And no matter what I do, I still don't feel like a good enough mom.
Yeah.
That is that cycle that just spins us out towards overwhelm, exhaustion, and ultimately burnout. And if you take a mom who's got a passion outside of motherhood, maybe some purpose-driven work, maybe some passion that she's involved in that's outside of motherhood. And she's also trying to do that well. By the way, that brain that I'm talking about, that achievement-oriented brain, is really useful in our work. It's not all bad, right? But if we are not filling ourselves up, continuing to take care of ourselves, we're going to burn out. And if we take that brain into mothering, I mean, the moments that I felt like a good mom, which I don't love that statement for many reasons, but the moments that I feel like a good mom are actually the moments not when I've created the best birthday party in the world or when I've shown up for every soccer game. It's when I'm sitting with my child doing nothing and connecting deeply.
Yeah.
That requires a different part of our brain. But
Mm.
many of us aren't wired for that. We're wired for achievement and not for connection.
Yeah. That's interesting. I can relate so much. Like I've always been this high achiever, having my own career, going back to school, but then having like more than one child. It's like you could go down this rabbit hole of just burnout, anxiety, just stress all the time. And it's hard. It's really hard.
I think what's really complicated about it, Allison, and this is where a lot of my own personal work has shown up for me that I do this in the Calm Connection system with folks. For better or for worse, how I, Kate Kripke, feel about myself is how I will feel about my child. And how I feel about my child is how she will feel about herself. And I'm going to say that again because it's a very profoundly brave and vulnerable thing to look at. If I believe that I'm not okay, that's the lens that I'm going to look at my child at. And suddenly I worry that my child's not okay. I look for evidence that she's not okay. And then the more I show up with her as a mom with this anxiousness about, oh my gosh, there's something wrong, or she's not good enough at something, or what's happening, it's that problem mentality. There's a problem I need to fix. So my brain looks for confirmation bias. My brain looks for all the problems. I'm setting this message to my child that she should worry about herself. And
Mm.
suddenly my child's hardwiring becomes, I'm not okay. And we can look at this with I'm not enough. If I believe I'm not enough, what I look for, my brain, confirmation bias, scans my environment, looks at my child for evidence of not enoughness. And now my anxiety, my tension in my body is heightened. And now, and again, this is maybe in real time what it might look like. My child's not eating enough, or my child's not sleeping enough, or my child doesn't have enough friends, or she's not polite enough, but that's where my brain is looking for all this evidence. And then I unintentionally send a message to my kiddo that she's not enough. And then she grows up with that belief about herself.
Yeah.
So this work is so important because it not only frees us from our chronic stress and tension, but it frees our children to give them space to really live their lives and to find themselves for themselves without having to carry some burden that we as mothers didn't tend to.
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious, like for these moms though that do feel guilty about prioritizing themselves, what is like one thing that you would say, okay, you need to break free from that. Try this first, or just like a step in that direction?
Great. So let's look at what guilt is. One thing I would say to my folks all the time and my children is that the feelings are never the problem. They're always wise. The emotions are never the problem. And many of us were raised in families where that was not the messaging we got. The message we got was fix it so you don't have to feel that way, or I'll give you something to cry about, or go cry in your room, or have a lollipop, right? With some version. It wasn't always traumatic, but some version of if you feel some kind of uncomfortable emotion, that means there's a problem either with you or the situation.
And you think if a kid falls down and like scrapes their knee, it's just like to be like, oh no, don't cry. It's okay. It's okay. And you're not meaning like literally don't cry, stop crying necessarily, but it's sending that message that,
It,
yeah,
for most of us, what's happening in that moment is I don't want my child to cry because I don't want to have to feel what I'm going to feel if my child does cry.
yeah,
And if we have a fix it mentality, now I'm like, oh shoot, now I have to fix his crying or her crying. I have to fix the thing that's upsetting them. Where really the definition of mental health is that my internal emotional experience matches what's happening externally.
Yeah.
So the emotions are wise and valid. They're really important to pay attention to. So, same with guilt. Guilt is a very important emotion to feel because it gives us information. The definition of guilt, like by the nature of that word, is having broken some kind of a rule. I did something wrong. I feel
Okay.
guilty. So the opportunity here is to ask ourselves, what is the rule that I'm telling myself I've broken? Good moms sacrifice everything all the time. Or good moms always put their kids to bed. Or some version of some rule that then we might get to say, wait a second, is it possible that's not true? Can I poke some holes in that rule? Is that my rule? Do I
Right.
actually believe that? Or was that just taught to me? Because if we can get ourselves to where actually, when I say that out loud, it doesn't actually make any sense to me. So therefore, it's probably not a fact. It might be a belief. It might be a perspective. It might be an opinion, but maybe it's not 100% true. And then we get to say what could be true instead. And I, again, don't love the term good mom because it is a fear of being a bad mom. So we get on this binary
Yeah.
thinking, but we'll use this term anyway because many of your listeners probably think in these ways. What if being a good mother was taking care of yourself in service of your child? What if being a good mother was feeding your brain so that you could be resilient to the inevitable stress that comes with parenting? Okay,
Yeah.
now going for an hour to go do that thing with a friend or move my body or God forbid take a bath with the door closed or whatever it is, maybe it's no longer selfish. Maybe it now is about taking care of my child because if I do that, I'm going to be more resilient later at bedtime. And if I'm more resilient later at bedtime, I'm going to have more access to connect with my child. And if I connect with my child's more likely to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Or maybe I, Kate Kripke, am feeling guilty because my kid walks in the door and my kid's 16, let's say, and she walks in the door and she's really upset about something. And I say, that's so ridiculous. Don't stress about that. And then I walk away and I go into the other room and I'm like, crap, I did that thing that's out of my integrity. In that moment, I didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to stay steady with her while she was upset. And I just needed her to not be upset for me. So I didn't have to deal with something. And I noticed that. And the guilt is a reminder to me that I'm out of my alignment. And now I get to do that amazing thing called repair, which, by the way, is what creates secure attachments with our kids. So if we never make mistakes, we don't have the opportunity to do this. And then I can come back and say, oh my gosh, can I do that again? You know what? You came in and said you were upset. And the first thing I did was told you to not be upset. And I am so sorry. Neither was that helpful, nor is that actually what I believe. So can I try that again? And then we repair. So that guilt in that example, when I tune into it, actually gives me the motivation to come back and do it differently to get myself back in alignment. So, guilt, again, to simplify, guilt is just another emotion, no problem, but it does give us the opportunity to ask ourselves, what is the rule that I've broken? And is it my rule or someone else's? Is it time to rewrite the rule or is it time to repair the mistake I made to get back on track?
That's so interesting.
So it really sounds like the first thing that someone has to do, and that working with you that they do, is just connecting more with yourself and figuring out like what are your core beliefs and like where did, you know, answering these questions, like you said, if you've got these preconceived notions of the kind of mom you're supposed to be, where's that coming from? Who, you know, who told you it had to be that way, and making your own rules in a sense.
Yeah, so we all have what we could call unconscious hardwiring, right? So 0 to 5 is a time when we, as children and our own children, are really developing a sort of core sense of self, right? And what we want in an ideal world, which by the way is really hard to do if we're living with chronic unsupported stress, is we want to parent in a way, we want to show up in a way that gives our children space to feel seen, heard, and understood without judgment, right? And often those are in the beautiful moments when our child draws an amazing picture and shows it to us, and they're all excited about the picture. And we say, look how beautiful it is. That happens there. But it also happens when they're clunky and clumsy and messy and feeling big emotions. And so in a quote unquote perfect world, we are showing up in a way where we can really tolerate an open hearted steadiness when our kids are feeling big things on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And of course, mistake and repair. We don't have to do that perfectly. There's a way when we mess up, if we're aware of the mistakes we made, we can come back and use those repairs as glue for the secure attachment.
Yeah.
All the way up to about age 12, right? That's a lot. That those sort of between 5 and 12 are those years when our kids are learning how to relate with others, right? They're developing all of their social engagements, and they're getting more messaging from not just ourselves at home, but from the outside world about who they need to be accepted and belonging. So there's all this brain development happening. Brains continue to grow until mid-20s, as we know, but that becomes our hardwiring that's often unconscious, meaning we're not thinking about, I'm not okay. Those aren't the words we're using. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. We're not like consciously saying those things to ourselves,
Mhm.
but someone doesn't respond to an email and our brain goes to, she must not like me. Or our child is crying and we go, I must have done something wrong. I must not been good enough at something, or I can't do this, or something. Our thoughts, our more conscious thoughts, if they're born from these deep fear-based wiring, there's going to be anxiety-producing thoughts. Of
Mhm.
course, I'm going to feel tight in my belly and my heart's going to race if I say those things to myself.
Yeah.
So it's about unearthing and understanding where they come from. I think traditional psychotherapy will focus its attention there. What the calm connection system does is really respects that with compassion. Of that makes sense. That is your hardwiring, given everything that you've told me. Now, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to keep acting as if that's true in 2025? Or are we going to begin to dismantle that so that we can see that actually today, that thing I keep telling about myself is not true? It's not true that I'm not okay. It's not true that I'm not enough. But we need to like start with the unearthing of it and giving it compassion and respect. And then we got to say, is it possible that's not a fact? And who would I be and how would I be moving through the world if I didn't have that belief? And then we begin to envision somatically, right? This is where the overlap of materialism and spirituality happens, right? We need to be open to the possibility that there's something bigger than ourselves happening out there, and to open our heart to that possibility and to see ourselves as interconnected to all these other moms on the planet who are struggling just like we are. It's not like there's something wrong with me. It's, oh, this is actually not that uncommon. And what if this isn't a problem? And what if I can lift up the burden of this belief and begin to experience myself as no longer the version of me that believes that there's something wrong with me? And when I open up to that possibility, suddenly other things become accessible.
Yeah. That's it's interesting. I mean, it's just like unraveling everything in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. The visual I love, which I did not make up, is that the sculptor does not create a head out of stone. The sculptor walks up to a block of stone and removes all the stone to reveal the head. The head's already there. And that's what we're doing. We're not changing people. There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with you. We don't need to change you, but we do need to move away the things that
Right.
are getting in your way of feeling the way you want to feel in your life.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I'm a visual learner too, so that's
Yeah.
helpful. That's helpful. What does it actually mean whenever you're working with your nervous system instead of against it? Would this be like more so recognizing those thoughts and then unraveling, okay, where is this coming from instead of just being reactive towards it?
Well, I think it's actually much more simple than that. So, first, we need to remember that our nervous system, like big picture thinking for a moment, when there's a thought or a belief, either real or perceived threat, our brain is going to release chemicals into our bloodstream that alert our physiology to get ready to fight, flight, or freeze. That's nervous system. And the same happens in the other, right? If we're having an experience of safety of some sort, our brain is going to release chemicals into our bloodstream that allow our body to rest and digest, right? So there's a whole pharmacy up here. So our nervous system, even if I'm feeling tense and tight in my body and my heart is racing, my nervous system isn't the problem. My nervous system is doing its job, which is to keep me safe, is to prepare me for danger so I survive. Sometimes when I work with moms and they say, I just feel so anxious all the time, what's wrong with me? It's like, though, there's nothing wrong with you. Your body is actually functioning. Your body is doing what it is meant to do. It might be that the thought is not accurate, that we have to actually work with the thought and help you understand as a perceived threat versus a real threat. So that's big picture. That's not necessarily what we're doing in the moment, but that's nervous system functioning. Okay. So again, just to shortcut that, if there's a real or perceived threat, my body is going to go into some state of fight, flight, or freeze. Rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, a feeling of disorientation, inability to think clearly, all of turning in my belly, digestion problems, talk about gut health, right? My body's going to do all of these things because that's what the body does when the only job is to stay alive, right? Tending to our nervous system really requires that we treat what's happening with care and compassion so that we're able to say, oh gosh, my heart is racing, my tummy is tight, I'm short of breath. Oh, I must be feeling a threat. So it's that sort of awareness. And see, I like have my hand on my heart. It's like that compassionate, oh, in this moment, something's feeling threatening to me. That is always, that has to be the first place to start because
Yeah.
we're just seeing ourselves, right? Okay, I'll figure out what to do about it in a moment, but first I just have to recognize what's happening. There is an incredible breath that I call the I am okay breath because in my work, the opposite of fear is not safety, it's confidence. And by confidence, I don't mean I'm awesome, I'm okay. I can have this unpleasant, uncomfortable experience and still be okay. And there's a breath pattern that we can engage in where our exhale is just a little bit longer than our inhale. So if I'm breathing in for 3, I breathe out for 4. That longer exhale sends a message to our brain that in this moment, there's no crisis. In this moment, right now, I am okay. And that breath will really quickly shift the physiology that's happening in the body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's
And
it's just so interesting. If anybody else were coming up to you, your kid or a friend, and they were really anxious or freaking out, you wouldn't say, okay, let's just ignore this and keep doing this. You would sit there and say, okay, let's sit for a second, let's breathe, let's calm down. You would acknowledge them. And it's just, okay, duh. Like, of course, if it's you, if your body's trying to tell you something, instead of saying, oh my goodness, I'm so anxious, like, I just need to take a Xanax, it's okay, Allison, you're okay. It makes sense, but it's so hard to do.
yeah, and Allison, even so, that is what doers will do. We'll be like, okay, just take a deep breath. You're okay. That is the first thing that those of us who want to not feel what we're feeling will do. Those of us that want to solve the problem will do
This
that.
is true.
Right. And we often do that with our kids, right? Our kids is crying and hyperventilating, and we'll be like, it's okay, just take some deep breaths. But we're actually missing like the most important part of this. And I will often say to myself and to my moms who I work with, what is it like to choose connection over control? When we say just take a deep breath, we're trying to control. When I say to my child, just take a deep breath, I'm trying to control. And it's not that problem solving isn't helpful, but what our nervous systems need most is connection. When
Yeah.
we're in a state of connection with ourselves or other people or our environment, our parasympathetic nervous system turns on, rest and digest. When we're in a state of disconnection, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And again, that's hardwiring because way
Yeah.
back then, if we were not connected with our tribe of people, our community, we would be left to die alone. So the connection is what begins to settle the nervous system. And that literally just sounds, I see you. Wow, my heart is racing. Wow, my
Yeah.
tummy is turning. Wow, I am feeling really anxious. And then, of course, we need to do that compassionate piece. We're like, okay, of course I am. That makes sense. I'm telling myself there's some major problem happening here. So, of course, I'm feeling these things. I would do the same with my child. My child is crying, hyperventilating, yelling, comes over to me, and I will say, wow, you look really upset right now. And then maybe I know what happened, and I might say, of course you do. Your buddy just took your toy, right? Or, of course you are. I told you I was going to be here for bedtime, and I just told you, and now I'm deciding to go out with a friend. It's those moments of reflection that will very quickly settle our and our children's nervous systems. We don't have to do anything. All we're
Right.
doing is allowing for that. And it's different than what we think needs to happen when we're tending to our nervous systems. We think we need to just take the deep breath, and it's not just move your body. It's not that those things aren't helpful, they are. But if we don't connect first, they probably won't work so well.
It's like, what is true in this moment?
Exactly.
What is true right now? Like, kind of
Exactly.
gather yourself, be aware of your surroundings and what's going on in your body. So obviously, we both know that the gut is just connected to so many different things. How is stress and anxiety like impacting our digestive health and our gut and vice versa?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. So, what we know about chronic stress, really, my definition of that, what I mean is that consistent feeling of tension and tightness. And that might look or feel different to different people, but we all know that internal experience. Like, I'm just tight, I'm tense, I'm guarded, I'm defensive. That is going to create tension inside our bodies. And when we are tight and tense and constricted inside our bodies, none of our systems are going to work very well. Our immune system, our reproductive system, our digestion system, to name a few, right? And it's so interesting because many times, again, here we go again, we can say, but I'm eating all the right things. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. Why isn't it working? I still am having digestive issues, and really we're missing the mind body connection here. And
Yeah.
if I'm stressed and tense up here in my brain, I will be stressed and tense in my gut and in my digestive system. So again, they work in tandem, right? Our health in our body affects our health in our mind. If I actually have some illness I'm dealing with, if I don't feel well in my body, it's going to be hard to have more positive thoughts, of course. And if I have negative stressful thoughts in my brain, my body is also going to follow suit. So I guess that's the most simple answer. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're deeply interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that a lot too. And notice that in myself. I think just years of chronic stress in some form or fashion just hit me all at once. And then, like, after motherhood, after the birth of each of my children, like, my symptoms just got worse. And of course, they did. Like, your body was going through more stress. But when you're in the moment, it's hard to see that.
Yeah, and that's where, if we said in the beginning, this idea of pathology or not pathology, that's where I actually really want to invite all of us to say, okay, so there's nothing wrong. Your body is responding the way it's supposed to respond to threat. There's nothing wrong with you. That is functioning. That what's quote unquote wrong, or where the problem is, that your brain is interpreting what's happening in this moment from the lens of what's happened in the past, right? Or from the lens of this fear-based limiting belief you have about yourself. And that's where we want to shift, because I have done so much work as someone of a history with anxiety. I have a history of digestive issues as well, of course. And this is obviously, I'm speaking your language, so this won't be weird for you. But to me, the sign of a healthy mind is that I'm pooping regularly and that my poops are a certain kind of poop. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm doing well in managing my stress because look at that bowel movement. Look at
Yeah.
that poop. It's a beautiful poop. That's how I can measure
Yeah.
how I'm
It's
doing in
it's
my
so
brain.
true though. It's so true though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. Kate, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today? This has been a really great conversation.
I think I just want to remind your listeners, I now have said it probably 4 or 5 different times, that they are not broken, that there's nothing wrong with them. It's such an inherently important perspective to take. And maybe the question is, if you believed that you were okay, if you believed that you were enough, if you believed that you were worthy or lovable or whatever your version of this is, two questions. First question, what would you do next? Second question, how would your life look and feel different than it does today? Because we can change that. You can change that. But first we have to be willing to ask those hard questions. Like, what do I really believe about myself?
That's awesome. Kate, I know we can find you on Instagram at Kate Kripke, and I'll be sure to link that and your website in the show notes for those listening.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Allison. I love these conversations. And yeah, mom to mom, let's just remind ourselves that we're good enough.
Yes, for
One
sure.
day at a time.
Yes.
That's a wrap on today's episode of What the Gut. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I hope you're walking away with insights that bring you closer to feeling your absolute best. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would take a moment to leave a review. It helps more people like you find this podcast and get the answers that they need. And don't forget to hit that subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. Let's keep the conversation going over on Instagram. Find me at Allison Gets Well for daily gut health tips, behind the scenes, and more ways to support your wellness journey. I would also love to hear what topics you want covered in future episodes. If you have a burning question or a guest that you'd love to hear from, shoot me an email at hello@allisongetswell.com. If you're ready for real personalized support on your health journey, check out my one-on-one coaching program at allisongetswell.com. Let's get you feeling amazing from the inside out. Until next time, stay curious, nourish your body, and take care of your gut. Catch you soon.